Welcome back to DissedMedia, a startup story, the podcast where I take you along our journey of starting DissedMedia from the ground up. You get to hear all about our challenges and accomplishments as we either grow DissedMedia or go bust. Either way, you're going to have a front row seat to hear it all. And along the way, we're going to have some special guests who share with us their wisdom and insights and what helped them along their startup journey to success. So get ready as we get into it and try to help those get better at what they do. Welcome back, everybody, to DissedMedia, a startup story, the podcast where we take you behind the scenes of starting a business from the ground up. And this week we have a very special guest joining us today to talk about a product that I think is going to be very helpful for a lot of people. So currently, it's a product that is focused on helping businesses that are in the restaurant industry, in the food service industry. And it's something that I know from personal experience from my wife, from my family, from my sister, from people I know who have special dietary needs. This is something that I think is very beneficial and can really help a lot of people. But before we get into all of that, first let me introduce Dylan McDonnell. Dylan, how are you?
I'm great, Ben. Thanks so much for having me on. Really excited.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to talk about your product, your app. But what we always start off with here is a little bit about founders, their background, kind of what brought them to where they are today. Because I think, based off of what I was reading, your background, your expertise isn't necessarily in the food space. This was something that came out of a desire to solve a problem of your own.
I think that's a fair statement. Yeah, no, definitely background wasn't in food at all, really, initially. I suppose for context, as you can probably tell, an Irish accent, although I was born in Philadelphia, just to make things a little bit more confusing. So I am a sneaky American, but grew up in Ireland and a corporate lawyer by trade. So I worked in big law for a number of years with a lot of the kind of global tech companies primarily, and then moved into investment funds a little bit. But that journey took me from Ireland to Australia, where I lived for about 4 years. And it was while I was there that I started the company. I currently live in LA. I moved about just under 2 years ago. But my reason, to your point, was celiac. So I was diagnosed as celiac when I was 10 years old after a few years of being quite sick and no one really knowing what was wrong with me. And then finally they figured it out. And so been on a gluten-free diet ever since. And it was just honestly a combination of a myriad of experiences over, say, 20 odd years when dining out that I just couldn't understand how it was so difficult to just find simple information as to what was in food, and whether that was just staff not knowing, getting served the wrong thing and being sick for a week after, the lack of awareness, the lack of care. And like I'm lucky in one way in that I'm not anaphylactic. Yeah, I'm not gonna die if they give me the wrong thing. I'm just gonna be sick for a few days. But as I kind of dug into, you kind of you think you live in your own bubble. And I'm curious, you mentioned your wife does she have a dietary requirement of some form?
Well, she tries to stick to a FODMAP diet, which
Larry,
is
oh,
one that
that's
is not
tough.
widely circulated or known
Yeah.
really much.
Very popular now though,
Yeah.
gut health, and it's like for anyone, yeah, no, that's blowing up. It has been over the last few years, but it's tough. It's
It's
not an
tough.
easy one to do, but it's a great example. And point being, you think you live in your own little bubble or your own little world of I'm probably there's only a few of us who really have this issue. But when I dug into it, in the US, there's 33 million Americans that have a diagnosed food allergy, which is 1 in 10. Then you have another 50 million Americans who have some sort of food intolerance. Dairy disagrees with them, but isn't technically an allergy medically diagnosed. And then you have another 70 million Americans who fall into the bucket of your wife, which is a dietary preference. Vegan, vegetarian, low FODMAP, keto, paleo, low carb. So between it all, it's about half the country who needs to or wants to understand what are the ingredients in the food to be able to make an informed dining decision based on their needs, preferences. And yeah, when I dug into it, realized there was no real solution out there that did that, and started Foodini to solve for that problem.
Walk us through a little bit about how you got there, because right now the app is available internationally. You're just starting to launch things here in the US. You mentioned before we got started that you're mostly B2B right now in the US, trying to work with restaurant partners and things of that nature. But how do you go from being in the corporate lawyer space to winding up heading this company that is now focused on this?
There's definitely a few moments early on where you're like, am I crazy? I had a solid career doing what I was doing and enjoyed it. But I think it was just one of those things where the more, again, I spent several months researching this and doing my homework before I jumped out. I didn't just have an idea and quit my work the next day, right? I spent several months, doing my research, doing my homework, like trying to figure out, is there a demand for this? And is this even something that is solvable? Before I got to a point where I had kind of commitments on some investment. I had a very rough beta in market that had been tested and got really positive feedback. I had a few initial customers on the restaurant side as well. And so I was in a position where I could see the initial signs of traction. I could see the ability with focus to scale this. And I just thought this is a problem that needs to be solved. And all you have to do is talk to a food allergy mom or someone like that about how this is such a, a thing that takes up so much of their headspace and is such a literal life and death issue in many cases for them and their family. And I believe this needed to be in the world. And so I decided to take the risk and glad I did.
Awesome. So, from the time of its founding to today, because you've moved around a little bit since you first brought this to the market, if you will. How has that journey helped, or maybe in some cases, there have been any roadblocks or challenges as you've moved around?
I think for us, it was the main challenges, honestly, were figuring out what we needed to get this thing to work. So, like, I initially started the company purely through the consumer lens. I have the problem. I'm celiac. Where can I eat? And like, I just need this information. And as we kind of were working more and more with restaurants, what really became apparent was the real issue was the fact that this data doesn't currently exist. So there isn't this magic pot of data that has all this allergen information that you could just plug into that like restaurants were gatekeeping. The reality was that in a lot of cases, this data just simply wasn't out there. And so that's actually, I moved. The main reason for moving to the US, whatever, about 18 months ago, was that all our major venture opportunity was here. All the biggest integration conversations we were having were here. All the biggest restaurant groups were here. To make this thing a reality, I felt like the US was where I needed to be to give this thing the chance it needed. So that was kind of the main reason for the move. But also in tandem with that, I brought on my co-founder, Erica Anderman, at that point in time. She'd had 15 years experience in restaurant and food tech at that point. Their first company was acquired by TripAdvisor, Scale, go-to-market at a few other restaurant tech companies very successfully as well. And as we put our heads together when we first met on this, she had a lot of the insights into the menu schemas over here and why this data was missing and what would be required to actually make this something that was scalable and could work with restaurants and play with all of the other industry players that you need to be able to do this. And so my combination of kind of the consumer insights and experiences I had combined with her menu data expertise, I think is what was the required combination to give this thing to find the solution that we have to be able to make this a reality for both the US and honestly the other markets we're in as well.
Yeah, the US food and restaurant industry, it's a bit interesting because outside of the big chains, and they have their own kitchens, their own kind of distribution networks, a lot of the local restaurants, a lot of them are kind of supplied by the big three, which are PFG, US Foods, and Cisco being the
Cisco,
big one,
yeah.
right? So it is when we talk about partnering with ingredients, because it really comes down to the ingredients and the sauces that you're using. One of the things I picked up on, I was looking at your website, is you don't just deal with the ingredients that are on the label, but you go even kind of a step deeper than that to what are the ingredients that make up certain components that are the breading, the sauce, the other accoutrements, if you will.
No, exactly. Because it's funny, a lot of people, will typically, when they've looked at this in the past, would say, okay, the ingredient is whole grain bread, but there's 20 different brands of whole grain bread. And some of them have sesame seeds and some of them don't. Some of them have this, some of them don't. So it's like it's no good just to have the ingredient. You need to have the actual brand SKU number of that ingredient to be able to do this properly. And I think that kind of segues very cleanly into like how we do what we do on the back end, which really is the most important piece here, right? Because trust and accuracy is such a key component of obviously the service we provide. But we essentially, there's, I would say, three main places where we get data from. One is, say, the POS or the ordering system, which is where we get like the menu structure, the modifiers. Two then is inventory management, recipes. So the only place that recipes are currently documented, if they're documented, because there's a lot of groups that don't have this done, but let's assume they do, is within a kind of inventory or recipe management system where they'll have the kind of breakdown of everything that is in each menu item, which to your point is required because it's not just good enough to be like cheeseburger with fries. We need to know what are all the things that are in that cheeseburger, what's the sauce, da 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 da. And then there's the third bucket, which is the products, ingredients, which is your US Foods, your Cisco, your PFG, your Gordon Food Service, etc. And that's where, again, we get that ingredient level data. And we need to essentially combine those three buckets of data to get a kind of a final product, which is a fully tagged, accurate menu with all the correct ingredients and allergens tagged. And what that allows us to do is to power a personalized menu experience for the consumer across 150 different allergies and dietary needs. So not just the like major nine and vegan and vegetarian, low FODMAP, like your wife. We have that entire like with the different food groups or the whole thing, depending on what stage of that diet she's on. And as I said, about 150 total. So that's the flow from back end to then in front of the consumer.
It seems to me that this is one of those things, especially I think in a current era where we are with a lot of changes that are happening at the FDA, for example, that we've put such a push on ensuring that we have calorie counts on food, that people are more aware of the things that they're putting in their body. Have you all made any headway in working with people that are even lobbyists at the federal level to try and get this information more integrated into, this space? Because to your point, this seems like a big missing piece of that story of what is on the menu.
100%. And so it's funny, I'll come to it in a second, but I feel like for the last 3 months, I've actually done nearly more political lobbying than I have anything else. It's consumed my life in one way, but I'll
I'm
come on
sorry
to
to
why
hear
that
that.
was. Yeah, listen, you and me both, you and me both. That wasn't in my roadmap initially, but you'll see where it came from. So a few different ways in which, the answer to your question is absolutely. A few different ways in which that is happening in my world, at least. One is I do a lot of work with FAIR, who are the Food Allergy Research and Education Organization of the US. They do a lot of great work around everything from trying to find a cure, but also to like trying to help families who have this problem navigate life. And so I chair a committee for them around guest communications in hospitality. And we actually had an in-person meeting in DC on Friday, literally a few days ago, which we're very fortunate. We have representatives from all the major food service groups and some of the biggest restaurant chains as well, who essentially were all coming together to try and help guide industry in how to cater to the people with food allergies based on what our belief of best practices. So that's kind of one big piece there. Back to the federal as the last piece, but the biggest shift for this community, I believe, actually happened about 3 weeks ago in California. So to date, and you made the point around calories, the only law that or regulation in the United States around nutrition allergies came in about a decade ago, whereby any group with 20 plus locations had to label for calories on menus. And that's why you see if you go into a Sweetgreen or a McDonald's, you'll see that on all their menus. 3 weeks ago, after several months of going through the process, Gavin Newsom signed Bill SB 68, which is the first regulation in the United States for food allergies in restaurants and food service. And it essentially says that any group with 20 plus locations, which is everything from your kind of mid-market chains, enterprise chains, but also a lot of the food service, the Compasses, Aramarks, Sodexos will be captured in different ways by this, must label all of their menus, physical and digital, for the major 9 food allergens effective 1 July 26, which is only a few months away.
Yeah.
So actually very tight implementation window. And that's, sorry, to be clear, that's if they had 20 plus locations nationally or worldwide, and one of them is in California, they're captured. And this is a major development for this community because now, for the first time, all these groups, and don't get me wrong, some of the major groups and some others have done the right thing and at least documented this information and have it available in a PDF somewhere on their website for those who need to go digging to find it. But for the first time, this makes this information front and center and that it needs to be on all menus. And also for all those other groups who maybe didn't think this was important or it wasn't a priority for them, they now must add a document and put this information in front of the consumer. They can do it one of two ways, by the way. They can either like manually label, like physically label all of their menus with chicken burger contains F, Y, and Z all the way down, or they can use a digital solution like a QR code on a menu that links out to a digital allergen menu. And that's, of course, what we do. So, our understanding is that most brands don't want to destroy their menus with a lot of all this extra stuff. So the link out option seems to be the very strong preference for everyone we've talked to, at least. And so it's really exciting for us because we've essentially become compliant software in the last few weeks. But more importantly, I think it's really important for the food allergy community because this is the first domino to fall in this space. And to your point around federal, whatever your political affiliation, MAHA are doing a lot of work around ingredient transparency. Food allergy has been announced as a priority health issue for them. And they are looking quite closely as to like ingredients in food. There was different things passed in Texas and a number of other states around trying to strip out a lot of the food dyes and different things like that. Point being, there's a lot of momentum, both at state and federal level right now on this issue, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this is, by evidence of what you're saying, this is clearly a bipartisan supported thing. You've got the governor of California who signed it into a state law. You've got at the federal level, everybody moving toward this direction. And even as I was looking at your company, what you guys do, and even the consumer side app, it just makes a lot of sense. A few years back when we started learning more about FODMAP, you could barely find anything about it. It just really wasn't much literature out there outside of a 1 or 2 page pamphlet a doctor might give you. It was just in the background. And then it caught my eye. So now the FODMAP has a dietary symbol that Kellogg's has been put. I were the first ones I spotted it on their box, and I'm like, oh, it's starting to get some traction now. We're starting to see more people responding to that, just as you would kosher or just as you would anything that's got a lot of sugar in it for diabetics. It's crazy the amount of people that have some sort of dietary issue, as you pointed out, but we have so few requirements. If you think of, I know we have a bit, right? But so little when you think about all the people who have issues and concerns.
It's mind-blowing. And that's why I think you look at Europe, you look at Australia, countries where there is regulation around it. Like in Europe, they brought in regulation around 14 major food allergens, and different companies apply it differently. But taking Ireland as the example, given that's where I'm from, like you cannot sell food in any restaurant in Ireland without labeling for the top 14 food allergens. Full stop. Standard has been for a long time. I've yet to hear a complaint from anyone in the country around issues with the process. It's just, again, it's no brainer. People need to know what's in the food. We tell them what allergens are in the food. Black and white, simple as that. And that's actually where the Senator Menjivar in California actually got her inspiration for the bill after a trip to Ireland. That's where that kind of stemmed from her. She was just like, why doesn't this exist? And the other thing, as we always say to restaurants, I said to you earlier, 173 million Americans. It's not a small group.
No.
It's not like we're talking about 5 million. We're talking about half the country who like wants this information. And then it's not just them. It's their family, their friends, their coworkers. If your wife can't find an option and she wants to eat low FODMAP at a restaurant, you're not going there. You're going to a different restaurant where you somehow do find that information. So like the veto vote, we call that, is a huge factor for restaurants in terms of like driving more revenue. And then on top of that, it's the most loyal consumer segment. When you do find that low FODMAP restaurant that has the options that you like, you're going to keep going back.
Yeah.
Because it was so hard to find it in the first place that you're now a loyal customer of theirs. And these are the things we're trying to reinforce and educate food industry around, is that this is not a segment you want to lose out on. This is a loyal segment that when they find you, they will keep coming back.
It's funny that you say that. When it's true, when we look around, Primarily, you know that if somebody has options that lean Mediterranean, then you're probably going to be able to find more things that are in your alignment. But to that point, I remember I came across a coffee shop. They had bulletproof coffee, and I love that. I know it's not for everybody. It's butter and MCT oil in your coffee, but I like it. And there's one place that I know of that serves it, and it is a place that I will go to. But to that point, I think when you find a restaurant, a location that serves what you need, you're going to be a repeat customer. And so that actually leads me to a question that I was going to ask you about whether or not you have any data that you're able to go to restaurants with to say, when you put this information out there, there is a lift in sales for your establishment.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And just to close out, Sarah, on the previous point, because you just touched on something I want to double down on.
You like bulletproof
Is
coffee too?
no, I actually don't. But it lends to a very important point, which is we don't make recommendations on whether you should or shouldn't eat bulletproof coffee, right? What we do is we provide transparency
Mm.
into what is in food so that you can make an informed decision as to whether that is suitable for you or not. There are some of our users have a life and death anaphylactic allergy. Others just are trying to follow low fat map today because they saw about it on TikTok. Like, point being, we're not saying what's healthy, what's not, what's good, what's not, what's seed oils. We're not giving medical advice. That's for you, your doctor, your dietitian, and whatever decisions you decide to make as an adult. But what we do is give you all of the data to help you make an informed decision based on your preferences. And I think that's a really important point here. But anyway,
Yeah, no,
uh,
it
yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
is.
Yeah, to your point, to your question though. So, yes. So, what we can do, there's kind of 2 points here. When we work with restaurants, the first obvious things that they see instantly is a reduction in questions asked to staff. So, we see about an average of 60% reduction in questions to staff because you are now putting the hands in front of the consumer. They no longer have to always use that front of house or waiter who is essentially the line of defense that the restaurant has between making a mistake and not, and who currently has to be an expert on every ingredient and every allergen in every menu item, which we know just isn't the reality on the ground in anywhere except maybe super high end fine dining restaurants. And so by putting the information in front of the consumer, we see about a 60% reduction in questions. We see a massive reduction in the percentage of mistakes, full stop, which is obviously from a legal, from a brand, from an every perspective, very important for restaurants. We have data around usage. So we can tell a restaurant last month in X location, you had 1,000 dietary profiles created, 40% were gluten free, 25% were vegan, 10% were keto, but you have no keto options on your menu. If you swap this ingredient for that ingredient, these items would become keto friendly. That could drive your bottom line by Y. So we can do a lot around like analytics on data for menu optimization. And also, obviously, that helps the restaurant's marketing as well. We do have the ability to integrate with online ordering, which is where your question around like seeing clearly the revenue uptake comes. The one issue we have in terms of, we know anecdotally and the restaurants see it just again more anecdotally, when the consumers see this information, they see an uptake in that segment coming in. But in terms of, and we see, I think it's typically about a 10 to 15% bump in revenue is what the kind of estimation is by having the kind of personalized experience. But again, just being transparent, because we don't process the transaction, it makes it a little trickier to give an exact number, because we can't see the order coming through unless we have the integration in place with their ordering. So we did a few case studies with a few restaurant groups where that kind of between 10 and 15% was what came out in the wash. But as we continue to scale and build out more of those integrations directly with ordering, I think I'll be able to give you a much more accurate number to a digit exactly and not a range.
I am a data analyst by trade. And as I hear this, one of the things I think about is I wonder how this is going to shift what menu items are preferred when people have new information. Is this going to mean that an item that might not have been selling as well is now selling better because people have information about what was in something, previously, or even give rise to kitchens coming up with new dishes, new opportunities, because now they're seeing, oh, these elements are things that people are trying to stay away from. We need to make more things like this, and that's going to draw more people into the restaurant.
And I think you used the keyword you used there was opportunity. That's how we see this. We don't see, like, you can go around with a stick and say now all you restaurant groups have to publish this information because the regulation is making you do it. That's the stick. And if you don't do it, you're going to be in breach and da 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 da. I see it more as this is such a major opportunity
Yeah.
for you to connect with such a huge segment of people, understand them, and optimize your menu towards them if you need to. And that sometimes that's not a menu overhaul. That can be a few like really subtle changes that could just make your menu so much more inclusive and could bring a lot more people in. So I think opportunity is absolutely the key word there. And I think the other interesting thing you said there, look at the modern day consumer, right? Take even food allergies out of it. The modern day consumer. Personalization is the buzzword here, right?
Yep.
Everyone wants experiences personalized to them. Look at an hour where like Mark Laurie at Wonder and Travis Kalanick at Cloud Kitchens, like their whole visions all come back to that complete personalization of the dining experience. Mark Laurie was talking about sending around biome testing kits to everyone's home so that they can understand their microbiome and like the function health or superpower esque thing, and then be able to create a custom meal for them based on, because they all obviously own their own supply chain, based on the results of those tests, and then deliver it to your home. Like that's how the visionaries in this world are thinking about the future of the modern consumer. And I think the restaurant industry needs to be very careful that it doesn't fall behind what some of these other personalized offerings might look like. And I think the ability to personalize the current dining experience in as much as possible is such a huge opportunity to meet the consumer where they are and to understand their requirements. And that's, again, a lot of this is education and awareness, because there's obviously a lot of restaurant groups that still don't know we exist, and that just need to kind of, it's a new category in a lot of ways. And so there is a learning curve. And so that's one of our major objectives right now, is just to make sure people know we're there and that we exist. And if they want to do the right thing and publish this information, or if they're required to now by regulation, that we make it very easy, we make it very seamless. And it's not the scary process that I think a lot of restaurateurs and food service people think it might be.
Yeah, because your company has done quite a bit over the last few years of kind of building the database, right? So you got a head start on a lot of this because the information is already at your fingertips.
100%. And like that, it's not easy to get necessarily. There was a lot of relationship building and stuff we still needed to do to get access to a lot of that data, because that's ultimately what this is. And I made the point at the start. The data didn't exist. That's why the consumer can't get the transparency. And ultimately, what we're building is that data layer that allows this transparency and personalization. And that for us requires partnerships and relationships with all of the other players in the space, because otherwise we can't do what we do in the way it needs to be done to meet the needs of the restaurants and food service industry.
One of the things that happens to be on the FODMAP diet is olive oil. But and one of the problems my wife has is that she can't have olive oil. Like, it's kind of the FODMAP is the template that has been the most useful. But and I love Italian food, right? So it's hard to go out to a lot of places. And one of the questions that we always have is like, well, what's going to be brushed with olive oil? Like, what's gonna have this in it? And there are so many different oils that restaurants use, from grapeseed to peanut. And those with peanut allergies need to be aware of the peanut oil. The Steak and Shake, which is a chain, recently came out using beef tallow for all of their fries. And some people have religious dietary restrictions to things like that. So, there's a number of use cases here to have this, integrated into your system. Question for you though. So we got the database, we have the information. If you're a restaurant, you own a restaurant chain, or you're managing some local places, how do you go about this process of partnering with you, getting that information into their business?
Yeah, and just great question. And also, just to make the point, our system and how it works, we have obviously as a lot of businesses now, but a very significant AI component. And we've done a lot of work training LLMs on the data sets to be able to do as much of the heavy lifting as possible, which at one time was completely manual for us. But we do have a team of dietitians as well. And I think it's important to understand that human in the loop is it's pretty critical here in terms of being that final QA and also identifying any potential gaps or questions and still having a conversation with restaurants, given in the majority of cases, we do find gaps in what we're given. It's very rare that it's like, you know, processed and done. There's almost always at least a few clarifications that should be met. And even just to be safe, because again, allergies is not something you want to mess with, right? It's not like caloric intake where if you're a few calories off, someone's going to die. That's with allergies. If there's trace of peanuts in there, that could have that consequence. And so you want that expert in the loop. But it's really quite simple. Restaurants will send us all of the documentation that they have today. So that again will be the POS data. If they have inventory, the inventory data. If they have spec sheets, the spec sheets. Send us everything. We also have worked with restaurants that have nothing, that literally have their menu and maybe a few handwritten notes or something like that. And obviously that's a more onerous process because we have to start from scratch with them. We do continue to do that all the time, but obviously the more data you have already, the quicker. Let's say you're a 20 plus chain. Most of them do have pretty good data. Send us the data that you have. We aggregate it. We enrich it. We spot where there might be gaps or anything missing or anything that needs to be clarified. We generally book a 1 hour onboarding call where we review everything together, ask any questions, so on and so forth. Typically after that call, we're good to go. And then we also, as part of our service, ensure that the menu is kept up to date throughout the year. So as menus change, which can often be seasonally, or specials are added, or the recipe changes because the chef decided to make a change, or whatever the case may be, we make sure that menu is kept up to date throughout the year. And we do all the work around that as well for all of our partners. Bearing in mind, we also can work not just with restaurants, but also with hotels, with stadiums, with schools and universities, with airlines, with cruise ships. Anywhere food is served has the same often challenges, and our technology is equally applicable in pretty much all of them.
So I'm going to ask you a question here. I don't know if you've come across this yet, but I can imagine that very soon you will, especially in California. So, having worked for Coca-Cola for many years of my life, they are famously known for their product being a secret recipe, as is KFC, as is Chick-fil-A. How do you get around that?
It's funny, we were literally talking about this in DC on Friday. Sometimes the restaurants are like, oh, we have some secret thing here that we don't want to. Even manufacturers is actually where we run into it more because we have a lot of our clients, they're like internal food safety teams will have to like ring a manufacturer and something on the label will say spices. And they'll be like, what spices are they? Like what when you say spices, can you tell us what spices? And they're like, no, that's a proprietary secret recipe. And then it's I've got a child here in my school who's allergic to mustard. So can you confirm if mustard is one of the spices or not? And then often they'll give like a yes or no to that, but they're still extremely guarded on it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, again, I wouldn't say this is the norm. But we do come across it from time to time. And what we say to all those groups where they make that point is, we don't need your recipe in terms of we don't need to know how much of this or how much of that or like we just need to know what are the ingredients in the food that map to what allergens. We don't need quantities, so that straight away saves a lot of it. We also do have the ability if there's something that they're very like secretive over, we can also like add a kind of a custom ingredient that is a bit less specific and then just tag all the allergens to that. So for example, we can do the spices and then say it has mustard as an allergens. So and only kind of tag the allergic kind of ones and not say other things that might not fall into the bracket of being something that people are allergic to. So there are workarounds that we've had to do a few times to make sure the consumer was getting the transparency they need while also protecting something that a certain client was very concerned about. And ultimately, for the consumer, getting 99.9% of the information is better than getting 0% of the information, which is usually the case before. But ultimately, it's when we hear those things, we just say, listen, if a consumer asks this question, you need to be able to answer it anyway. It's not like something you can hide. You can't tell them. You can't ignore the question around if there's peanuts in this or not. Because like that's and anyway, now pretty much every big chain is captured by this regulation in California. So I think their ability to fall back on any kind of defense here, especially as it pertains to the major nine allergens, is gone now anyway.
You know, you mentioned in in the EU and the UK, they've kind of been on this for some time. This last year, I was in London, and I had gone out to grab some food for my wife, who just went to a pub, and I ordered something. I said, "Can I get it on the side? Like, I don't want it in there. Can you put it on the side?" And um, I've gotten into the routine of when somebody says, "Is this for dietary reasons?" I just say yes, right? Boy, man, they take it seriously over there, because he said, "Is this for dietary reasons?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Who's this for?" And I said, "Well, it's for my wife." "Is she here?" "No, I'm picking this up for her." "Well, she needs to authorize." It's like they wouldn't sell me the food unless they had her permission to alter it in some way, for diet, because it was for dietary reasons. Um, Completely new to me. So
Yeah,
I ended
it's
up,
interesting, right?
yeah.
Oh, sorry, go on. No, no, go on. You ended up.
Yeah, no, no, no. So I was just going to say that I ended up basically telling him, well, no, actually, it's for me. Like,
You just changed your story. You're like, I just want. Yeah.
and it seemed to be all the permission they needed to do what I asked. But apparently, there is some very strict guidelines around what they will and won't do to altering food as it relates to a dietary need.
Yeah, no, and listen, I think it's you touched on another very important point here, right? I have massive sympathy for the food service and restaurant industry as in relation to this issue. Nearly every restaurant group and everything besides wants to do the right thing,
Yeah,
and they care about guest experience and they want to publish this information to consumers if they could. The challenge has been for a lot of them that, like I said, the data just hasn't existed, and like they legally there's been like concerns around consequences about making mistakes, which I think now a lot of that has gone away, but it's hard to keep this information up to date. It is the way the whole food chain and supply chain works here. Manufacturers sometimes change the ingredients and products, and that isn't necessarily sometimes doesn't trace all the way down to restaurants. The chefs, especially in independents, sometimes they run out of a sauce and they send someone down to the local corner store to buy more, and they could buy a different brand, and all of a sudden the allergy makeup of an item is different to what it was yesterday because there was a substitution. Like, these are things that can happen. I would say they're generally more edge cases, but they do happen. And so if you're in the food service industry, like it's tough. It's not like something that they can just wave a wand and do it all perfectly. And I think the consumer needs to be understand that as well. And that's a massive important piece here, is that for anyone who has a severe allergy, every time you eat out, no matter how much information you're given, you're taking a risk, right? You just are. There are no guarantees in this world, right? There could have been a mistake made anywhere from the manufacturing level to the distributor level to the restaurant level. The chef could have got out of the wrong side of the bed and forgot that salad didn't have nuts in it and put a bag of nuts into it and then served it. There's so many things that can technically go wrong that if you have a severe allergy, like, you need to be aware of that. And there are so many steps as that consumer that you need to take to mitigate against that, from doing your research in advance to telling them when you get there that you have this allergy, to if you look in their eyes and you can see that they're saying, oh yeah, I think that's fine, doubling down and insisting to talk to a manager or the chef or whoever to be safe. There are all these things that you can and should do as a consumer, because the restaurant, even the best restaurants, can still sometimes make mistakes.
sure.
And so we don't want to find ourselves in a world, to your exact example in the UK, where all of a sudden people can't eat out if they have an allergy, or restaurants are sending them away. What we need is provide as much information and transparency as you possibly can. Put that in the hands of the consumer and allow them to then, based on their risk profile, make a decision as to whether this is a suitable option for them or not. That includes things like cross contact. Is there peanuts and nuts in your and shellfish in your kitchen? If so, do you have a separate food preparation area for people who have allergies? If you have a severe one of those allergies and the answer from the kitchen is no, then maybe as the consumer, you should make the decision not to eat in that restaurant. And so it's both sides here. Restaurant needs to provide as much transparency as they can to allow consumer to make an informed decision. consumer needs to be sensible and pragmatic and make a sensible decision based on their risk profile. And I think that's where the kind of we need to find that balance.
Yeah, and I will say, to your point, having worked many years in the consumer goods industry in beverages, right? So either soda or most currently wine. Um, Come in contact with a lot of people who are restaurant owners, a lot of people who are chefs and prepare food. And to your point, the one thing that stands out above all is they truly enjoy this business. They truly enjoy making food for people. They love making people happy through the things that they can do. And this is just one of those extra elements that I think I see it as a plus. I see it as a way to bring more people in. I think the early leaders on this who have this information integrated into their restaurant menus are going to see business boosts from it. And I know this isn't you saying this. This is 100% me saying this because it just seems logical that if somebody knows of a place that they can go to, knows that they can find the information that they need about the food they're being served, that they're going to be more inclined to go there. And because they're kind of part of the tribe, right? It's great for them.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And then, as I said earlier, they're the most loyal consumer. So once they find you and they have a good experience with that item that is suitable for them, they will keep coming back.
Real quick, Dylan, tell me about the consumer side of this. I know you mentioned that it's still in beta. You guys are working on bringing that more to market. That was actually the app that I downloaded off the App Store. But you said right now it's mostly being beta tested in the LA area.
Yeah. So essentially, what we with all any of our restaurants we work with, we have our own app, Foodini app, that essentially consumers can download, create that profile, but then use it to discover restaurants in their area. Versus our current experience in restaurants and food services, like a QR code on the menu or a button on the website that goes to a URL powered experience. So it's more within the rest that individual business's ecosystem. The app is for us is discovery. So if we work with 100 restaurants in West LA, allowing consumers to choose from them the restaurant that has the most suitable options for them because we have the data for all of those restaurants. So we essentially use that for the consumers to find suitable options. And for restaurants, that's a clear revenue driver that we provide them over the top. Obviously, what's interesting, we got one or two bad reviews in the App Store because someone downloaded it and was like, there are no options here where I'm in Houston. And we're like, we're literally betaing this in LA there. That's why. But point being, the more restaurants we sign up with, and as we continue to build critical mass of choice, which is the key here in each of these areas, all of a sudden we're going to have a lot of really valuable data for consumers as they look to discover new places. And so we're going to continue to scale that over the next while. So if anyone wants to check it out more just from give us feedback on the kind of initial beta, that would be great. But just to forewarn, we're basically just in the kind of greater LA
Yeah,
region
hold
at
your
the start of
bad
that.
reviews, folks.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
I'm thinking though that because of the bill in California, basically any chain of 20 locations or more that happen to exist in other parts of the US, you're green lighting. I don't know if this is the way it's going to work or not, but I would think if you're a Cracker Barrel, because you got locations in California, now you're going to have Cracker Barrels all over the US because it's required in California.
and that's the most brands we spoke to have said that they will put this in all of their locations nationally, assuming they have some in California. Because again, what do most chains do is they have a consistent experience everywhere.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't want a consumer to walk into the Santa Monica location and see that allergen information, then walk into New York and Manhattan and not. And once they've done the work to do it, why would they not anyway? Right.
Yeah.
So we believe, yeah, almost all are going to, which will then have the trickle on effect of then all of the other restaurants in that area or restaurateurs start seeing, oh, all the big brands are doing this. Why aren't we doing this as well as an optionally, even though we're not caught by the regulation? So again, I think that the next 12, 24 months in this space is going to be really interesting to see how quickly restaurants start to understand, to your point earlier, this isn't just a compliance regulatory piece. This is an opportunity. And we're losing out by not taking advantage of it. And it's the right thing to do anyway.
Yeah, it really is. Man, Dylan, I appreciate your wisdom, your knowledge. This is a really good topic. It is such an important thing that is going to be beneficial for a lot of people with allergies. And for some, it's a preference, as you mentioned. Sometimes people are just trying to eat differently, eat a keto diet. For others, like yourself, and even a few in my family, I have some folks who have celiac in my family. It's an absolute must. And then there are even the more severe allergies on top of that. I know celiac can be very, very painful and very difficult to navigate. So, uh, thank you for putting your time, energy, and effort, leaving your profession that you were groomed at, to bring this to the masses.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Listen, it makes it easier when you know that there's such a tangible benefit for so many people. No, we love doing what we're doing, and we're just excited to keep growing and putting this information in front of as many people as we can.
So, Dylan, real quick, if those listening to this want to get in touch with you, want to reach out to Foodini, how do they do that?
Yeah. So listen, anyone who has wants to reach out to me can get me at my email, Dylan, Dylan, at getfoodini.com, getfoodini.com. LinkedIn is a good place to find me as well. And then our website is foodini.co. So foodini.co. Any of those three places can find me / the company.
Awesome. Dylan, thank you again so much for your time. Thanks for all those wonderful information. I know there's going to be people out there who are going to hear about this. And if you haven't yet, it sounds like thanks to California, you will be hearing about it soon. One quick thing I wanted to also just mention, I remember years ago when the calorie thing hit for restaurants, how challenging it was, because at the time, it meant updating, printing out new menus. It meant putting new menu translights in onto the menu boards in the restaurants and everything. Nowadays, so much is digital. It's literally just updating a file on a picture and putting a QR code out there. I would imagine the implementation of this is going to go so much better than the calorie count implementation did years ago.
Certainly, if they use us, Ben, it certainly will.
Yes, absolutely. And that was my my closing segue to say this is why you need Foodini. Folks, thank you all for checking out DissedMedia Startup Story. Appreciate it. If you heard something here that you like, if you think that you have a friend, a family member, a business colleague who would love hearing things like this and more things to come, please give us a like, give us a share, tell a friend, forward this podcast to someone you love, or give it a rating. We'd love that too. But either way, thank you all for checking this out. We hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to DissedMedia, A Startup Story. This podcast was produced and edited by Ben Olmos and is a production of DissedMedia Corporation. If you're interested in learning more about anything you heard on this episode, please reach out to us at podcast@dissedmedia.com. You can also get more information about this and other episodes or information about our guests by checking out dailypitch.news, our business and insights publication focused on helping managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs get better at what they do.